Good morning, I'm Chris Fox, and today we're talking about Dan Harmon's story circle and how you can use it to plot your novel. So there are a lot of different techniques to plotting your novel. I've tried a bunch of them. This is the one currently that's resonating the most with me. So first, a little bit of history about it. The process begins based on Joseph Campbell's monomyth. So for those not familiar, I highly recommend a book called Hero with a Thousand Faces, or even just watching some of the old Bill Moyers videos where he interviews Joseph Campbell. Just simply amazing. And it teaches you a lot about story structure and how ultimately every story has similarities. This is something that Joseph Campbell posited early in the 20th century and really caught on. And it's something that, for a creator, when you actually read what he has to say, it really, ignites that light bulb in your head. You're like, oh my God, I get it. Well, Dan Harmon took that a little bit further. And so what Dan did is he codified the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell had created into a series of steps that we can use to plot our novels. We're going to jump into that in just a second here. And it goes over each of the major plot points that you're used to seeing in a standard three-act structure. And it does it in a way that also grows the character. So I guess the problem I've had until now is I've got my plot and then I've got my character arcs, but they're two very separate things. With this process, what you're about to see, they're actually unified. The character growing is a necessary part of the plot, and this gives you the tools to express that. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll take a look at the story circle. Okay, you can see here we've got The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. And I want to start with how the circle works, because this is something that Dan Harmon really builds on. The top world here, the top part of the circle, is the known world. It's the ordinary world. It's the conscious mind. It is all the things that are normal for this character. And this bottom world, the special world, the heroic world, the unknown world, is where all of the characters' transformations are going to occur. So they start off in their ordinary world. They get a call to adventure. You can see them hitting this threshold and then going and beginning their transformation and going through challenges and temptations on their journey. And then here at the bottom, this is the depths of the abyss, the belly of the whale, is something where the character meets the goddess. That's how Joseph Campbell phrased it. And in the process of meeting the goddess, they are transformed finally into their higher self. This is where the transformation begins. They usually pay a price for that transformation. And then they return to their ordinary world, changed and able to affect change around them. So whatever problem they had over here, they can now solve because they have changed. And you can really apply this breakdown to any story you can think of. And I think it's a lot of fun to practice doing exactly that. So maybe think about your favorite novel or movie and go through the steps, and you'll notice that it probably lines up pretty well with what you're seeing here. But this, as useful as it is as a compass to show us how stories work, doesn't really tell us how we can plot a novel following this. And I think that's what Dan Harmon tried to rectify. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the story circle and how it relates to this real quick. And you'll see it looks very, very similar to the hero's journey. It's very recognizable, but it's also a lot easier to work with as a creative. So let's jump into that. Okay, so this is where the magic happens. Now, first off, let me start by saying that this graphic and the previous one I pillaged from Google. I don't own those. I didn't make them. Thank you to the people who did. I will endeavor to find the links and put them in the description. So looking at the story structure in this story circle here, you'll notice that it looks very, very similar to the hero's journey. And most of the components are the same. So to understand kind of how you can apply this to plotting, you want to start at the macro view. So we're looking at the two worlds and sort of the quadrants of this circle. So let's start with top and bottom. Top represents life, consciousness, order, the ordinary world. Bottom, death, unconsciousness, disorder, chaos. This is the crucible of change, basically, the special world, the place the hero has to go. So we're really, as a hero and a character in our arc, journeying all the way down into the subconscious, facing our darkest fears, being changed by them, seizing control, emerging into the light, and coming full circle. So that's how stories work. They're about the transformation of characters. You can also bisect the circle vertically. So if you bisect it vertically, this half here is inaction. This is where the character is reacting to all the events that are occurring in basically the first and the first half of the second act, where they're doing the best they can, but they're kind of being carried along. Then we have this pivotal point here, which we'll go over in a minute, where everything changes. They cross another threshold, and now they're seizing control of their destiny and working their way back into the light. So just again, top is going to be your life, your ordinary world. Bottom, your unconsciousness, chaos, disorder, special world. And then you've got an inaction on one side and action on another. The individual steps are pretty straightforward. It took me a little bit to understand what they mean and how they work, but they all relate pretty well to a 3-act structure, and they all sort of just make me go, aha, it makes sense. The first step is simply to give our audience a protagonist. We just start writing a character, and what'll happen, and this is the wonderful thing about the human brain, we'll immediately begin to empathize with them and sort of become that character. So you just have to show a character in their ordinary world. As quickly as possible, you've got to give that character something that they need. They have to want something and need it powerfully, or else we don't have a story. Using an example that everybody knows, Star Wars, this is where Luke is tinkering on R2-D2 and the hologram pops out and he sees a beautiful princess who needs help. So what does Luke want? He wants to rescue the princess. And remember this need because it's going to be important later. We get to the first threshold. So now he is going from his conscious world into the unconscious, into the special world. And what's the event that marks that? His aunt and uncle are killed. So this is where he comes back to his moisture farm, finds that his family's been wiped out, and what's Luke's only choice? He's got to leave Tatooine with Obi-Wan and fly up into space and deal with some problems. So this is the road of trials, where he is searching and trying to get the thing that he wants, to rescue the princess. He blasts off of Alderaan, and they have to run away from the Star Destroyers. I'm sorry, he blasts off from Tatooine. They're going to take my Star Wars card away. He blasts off from Tatooine and is going to Alderaan. And they show up to find that Alderaan's been destroyed. And they're going through all of these problems now. Oh no, we're getting towed in with a tractor beam. And the Millennium Falcon is stuck on the Death Star. And they've got to find a way off. Well, they go through all these problems until we get down to what Joseph Campbell called, and I mentioned in the previous section, meeting the goddess. This is where they get what they want. So what did Luke want in step 2? He wanted to rescue the princess. We get down to step 5, and he does that. But here's the problem. You give the character what they want at the midpoint of the novel, but then they find out it isn't really what they want. Is rescuing the princess really what Luke wants? No. As it turns out, he's going to need to blow up that Death Star and to protect the rebellion. So he sort of gets what he wants and finds out that it's not what he really wants. And this forces a moment of change for him. He's now stripped away of all of his pride and his flaws and the things that he thought he wanted when he was an immature moisture farmer on Tatooine. And now he has to become something greater. And he crosses the second threshold and is starting to take control. Now, he gets into the gun cockpit on the Millennium Falcon and blows up some fighters, goes back to the rebellion to deliver the plans. Once they deliver the plans, they're going to have to defend against the Death Star. Here it comes. So he's ready to launch back into space on an X-Wing and blow up that Death Star. Number 6 here, while he's going through this transformation, he's going to take what he wants. He's going to learn to use the Force, and he's going to become a very skilled pilot very quickly, and he's going to help the rebellion. But to do that, he's going to have to give something up. So he pays the price, and Obi-Wan dies. Darth Vader cuts down Obi-Wan. There is a loss. There is something that is taken away from him. And you'll see this replicated in pretty much every story. People are going to lose something. There's almost always a cost for them to get what they want. Then finally, Luke is changed. He's now much more confident. He understands what the Force is, and he's going to use it. He has been changed and is returning back up into the ordinary world. He's capable of change, and so instead of relying on the technology that he has in the cockpit, he turns off his targeting computer, uses the Force, and blows up the Death Star. And then he's returning full circle. So you can see how this applies to a story, and you can see how you can use this to plot a novel. In the final section of the video, I'm going to show you how I've used this on one of my upcoming novels from scratch. So I didn't really have a story. I sat down and I just wrote up some notes about what I want to write, and I'm creating new characters. It's all, from scratch. We'll look at Scrivener, and you get to see how you can put this into action for yourself. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got Dan Harmon's story circle set up. What I did, I've created a number of different documents that are world building and telling me a little bit more about, sort of what I'm creating. The basic pitch is this is my space fantasy. This is a welding of magic and technology. So you've got mages that, tech mages, that can power rifles or armor or other technological gadgets with their magic. And my main character is going to be one of these mages. So his comfort zone is not very comfortable. But his ordinary world, you can see here, he starts off as a prisoner in a starship with no memory. And I'm not going to read the entire description because you guys can do that yourselves. But you can sort of see how I'm hashing out his ordinary world and figuring out who Aaron is and sort of giving context and placement for the character. Then we move on to number 2, need. And you can see Aaron obviously needs to survive the catalyst from what you read above, the body of the dead god, where he's getting this power. But ultimately, he wants to escape his captors. He's got to get away from these guards, and he wants to be free again. This is his primary need. He'd love to get his memory back as well. But ultimately, it's his need for freedom that's serving as the story need, which will become important later. He manages to survive the catalyst. He comes out, finds out that Nara has betrayed him. She was never a prisoner at all. She was actually just a plant. And so he's still a prisoner, even though he's got these powers, and he's going to be sold into slavery, and he's pretty pissed off about it. When all of a sudden, a Confederate Navy ship pops out of the warp and arrests everybody aboard. So now all of a sudden, Aaron goes from, I've been enslaved by these people, to I'm entering a whole new road of trials. I am a soldier in a military kind of against my will. He's been pressed into service. And he's now going to have to see and do a whole bunch of things that he didn't expect. And these are going to be his road of trials. They're stripping away his pride, his needs, and sort of replacing them with a mature, confident individual. And again, I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm going to scroll kind of very slowly past it. His road of trials, things start getting really long, and you can see I wrote a lot more information because it's a pretty significant part of the plot. Hopefully I'm going slowly enough. If not, I suppose you can pause it to read this. And huge parts of this, by the way, are going to change, but this was just my stream of consciousness trying to do each part of the story circle. So we finally get down to, meet the goddess, and you can see how I've implemented that. Then we get to the take and pay, where I'm going to have my hero sacrifice something. For the return, I've left this blank intentionally because I still have a few more things to figure out about the world. But this is the epic ending right here. This is where, Luke destroys the Death Star, and I'm not quite ready to write what that's going to be for me because I need to figure out a few more things about the mechanics of my spell system and how that's being implemented. But I did do the ending. And the reason why that's important is sort of 1 and 8 need to dovetail really nicely. You've got to come back full circle change. So in Meet the Goddess, Aaron finally gets what he wants. He's no longer enslaved. Theoretically, he could leave the military right then and there. But instead, now he knows there's something more important than him. He's got to protect humanity from the Crocs. And in order to do that, he's going to have to stay part of the military. So he chooses, when he meets the goddess, to stay in the military and to be a part of something greater and not to pursue getting his own memory back. Manages to have his epic ending where he's, killing the Crocs. Gets to the end and is changed. So that's kind of how I implemented it. I will probably show you guys in additional videos what I'm doing with the stories that I'm working on and sort of how I use this elsewhere, because I'm now dropping in a story circle document in every one of my stories. And if I have a lot of story lines in the same book, like let's say 2 or 3 different arcs, I'm doing one of these for each of the point of view characters so that everybody's kind of getting their transformation. Everybody's a different character at the end, and that the plot is sort of seamlessly woven into that. So I realize this is a lot of information, and one short 15-minute video is not going to help you master this, but there are other videos on the internet on Dan Harmon's Story Circle. There's Dan Harmon's material himself. He put it out there all in a blog post explaining how it works. I highly recommend reading it, and I will link to that in the description of the video. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful to you guys. If it is, please let me know in a comment. Shoot me an email. If questions were raised by the video, if there's things that still aren't clear, ask them. I'm happy to answer those. But in the meantime, I'm going to get back to the writing.